Every believer eventually reaches a moment when the weight of debt feels heavier than their faith. They look at their bank account, see numbers that don't add up, and quietly wonder why breakthrough hasn't happened yet. Most people assume God will transform their finances only when they start making more money, but biblically, that's not how God works. He often begins the process right in the middle of a low-income season, where discipline can grow and stewardship can take root. The surprising truth is this: financial freedom has far more to do with mindset, clarity, and obedience than with income. Scripture is full of people who started with almost nothing. A widow with 1 jar of oil, a boy with 5 loaves, Joseph in prison. And yet each of them experienced supernatural provision because they aligned their habits with God's wisdom. And when a believer learns to treat their money with purpose instead of panic, even a small income becomes a tool for transformation. If you like our content, consider supporting our ministry through the link in the description. In this video, you'll discover the exact biblical framework God uses to break the cycle of debt. It's not about luck. It's not about earning more first. And it's not about waiting for a miracle. It's about following a process that frees your mind, strengthens your habits, and positions you for the increase God has been preparing behind the scenes. Why God requires you to face your numbers before He fixes your finances. There is a moment in every believer's financial journey when God stops dealing with their feelings and starts dealing with their facts. A person may pray, cry, fast, and ask for breakthrough, yet heaven waits for a simple act of obedience, facing the numbers. The theologian understands why God never blesses confusion. The mentor knows why. Clarity creates strategy. And anyone who has ever tried to make money on a low income knows why. Without truth, there is no path forward. Proverbs 27:23 says, "Be diligent to know the state of your flocks," which in today's language means know exactly where your money is going. When a person finally sits down with a pen and paper and lists every debt, every balance, every bill, something spiritual happens. Light replaces fear, order replaces chaos. This is why business leaders, even in the American financial market, swear by this step. It's not glamorous, but it is holy. The wise understand that God won't multiply what you refuse to measure. It's like someone asking God to grow a business while never checking revenue, expenses, or cash flow. It simply doesn't work. At this stage, many people experience shame or anxiety because they've avoided looking at their statements for months or even years. But Scripture never commands anyone to hide from truth. In fact, John 8:32 reminds them, "The truth shall make you free." Facing their numbers is often the first step toward freedom, even before they make money, even before any debt is paid off. It's the moment they decide to govern their life the way Proverbs teaches, with wisdom instead of worry. A practical exercise often recommended is setting aside one evening with no distractions, phone off, TV off, notifications muted, and listing debts from smallest to largest. People are shocked at how quickly peace begins to form just by writing them down. This is the same discipline used by investors analyzing stocks like Apple, Microsoft, or broad index funds such as VUOO or QQQ. They always know their numbers before making a move. If the wealthy do it in business, believers must do it for their financial restoration. The key insight is this: God does not fix what you are pretending doesn't exist. Just as Nehemiah inspected the broken walls before rebuilding Jerusalem, Nehemiah 2:13-15, a person must inspect the broken parts of their financial life before expecting divine help. Ignoring the numbers delays the miracle, but honesty accelerates it. The educator and theologian inside this message want the listener to understand that it isn't a money issue, it's a stewardship issue. And once someone faces the truth on paper, God can finally bring order to the chaos. This opens the door for the next step, one that surprises most people because it goes beyond math and enters the realm of mercy, strategy, and negotiation. The biblical logic behind negotiation, mercy, and debt reduction. Most people never realize that the Bible is full of negotiation. God Himself negotiates with humanity through covenant, mercy, and redemption. So when a believer picks up the phone to call a creditor and ask for a settlement, they're not begging, they're applying a biblical principle. Proverbs 15:1 says a gentle answer turns away wrath, and in the financial world, a gentle, honest request can turn a $5,000 medical bill into $3,500. This isn't manipulation, it's stewardship. It's using wisdom to make money work for your freedom rather than your frustration. Many Christians think negotiation is unspiritual, but Scripture disagrees. Jesus taught active confrontation paired with humility, Agree with your adversary quickly, Matthew 5:25. That principle applies beautifully to debt. A polite phone call expressing sincerity and commitment can open doors the math never expected. Business professionals in the American market negotiate everything, from salaries to contracts to vendor fees. Believers should adopt the same mindset when fighting debt, especially on a low income where every dollar matters. A practical example. Someone owes $7,800 in old medical debt that has been sitting in collections for years. They call with respect, explain their situation, and ask if a lump sum settlement is possible. Collections agencies often prefer some money now over maybe money later. Suddenly, the balance drops to $4,200. No miracle, just initiative. People think this never happens, but it happens daily to those who ask. James 4:2 reminds us, "You have not because you ask not." Negotiation activates a mindset shift. It tells a person, "I'm not powerless. I'm participating in my deliverance." That spiritual ownership matters. When Israel walked around Jericho, God didn't knock the walls down before they obeyed. He moved after they moved. The same is true for debt. A believer shows seriousness by picking up the phone, exploring options, and refusing to remain passive. This is the kind of habit that later helps them make money intelligently, manage business decisions wisely, and steward resources the way Scripture teaches. Even when negotiations don't produce huge discounts, the act itself builds courage. It strengthens the voice, the will, the discipline. In behavioral finance, this is called identity reinforcement. Each action reinforces who you are becoming. A person who negotiates debt today becomes the person who negotiates salaries, business deals, and investment opportunities tomorrow. It is training for bigger assignments. And once negotiation cracks open the door of possibility, God leads the believer into a deeper level of discipline, not with creditors, but with themselves. This sets the stage for the next step, where budgeting becomes a spiritual training ground for dominion. How God uses budgeting to train your mind for stewardship and wealth. Budgeting is not punishment, it is discipleship. When a believer writes down their income and expenses, they are practicing the same discipline Joseph used when managing Egypt's resources in Genesis 41. God elevated Joseph because he proved he could handle abundance and famine with equal wisdom. Today, a person learning to budget is undergoing the same training, learning to govern their money with clarity rather than emotion. This is where stewardship begins, long before they make money or build a business. Most people resist budgeting because it feels restrictive, but in reality, it brings freedom. A zero-based budget, where every dollar is assigned on purpose, forces the mind to think like a financial leader. Suddenly, bills become data, spending becomes strategy, and needs are separated from wants. This is the same mindset great investors use when analyzing assets like broad market ETFs, knowing exactly where each dollar is going before making a move. God uses this discipline to reshape how a person sees their resources. Once the believer identifies how much extra money exists each month, something powerful happens. They begin to see margin where they once saw a limitation. Many discover an extra $200, $500, or even $1,000 they never noticed because it was leaking through impulse spending. This mirrors the story of the widow in 2 Kings 4, whose small jar of oil was enough once she counted, measured, and acted in faith. Budgeting reveals the oil God already placed in their home. A recommended practice is treating debt payoff like a fixed bill, right under giving, food, and housing. When someone places debt payoff at the top of their budget, they shift from "I'll pay debt with whatever's left" to "this is part of my assignment." That kind of intentionality changes everything. Business owners do this instinctively. They pay themselves, they pay core expenses, they invest, and they eliminate waste. A believer must learn the same structure if they expect long-term financial freedom. As the months pass, the person begins noticing something deeper. Budgeting is not just about money, it reveals character. It exposes impatience, impulse, fear, and inconsistency. It trains self-control, which Galatians 5:23 calls a fruit of the Spirit. Every line on the budget is an opportunity to practice faithfulness. People who master budgeting find themselves more confident in investments, wiser in business, and more able to make money without sabotaging themselves. And once this financial discipline takes root, the believer is ready for the next phase, a method that blends psychology, momentum, and biblical wisdom to accelerate their breakthrough faster than logic alone. The next step is the debt snowball, and it carries a spiritual rhythm most people never notice until they experience it. The spiritual power of the debt snowball and why it works, even when math says it shouldn't. The debt snowball is one of those strategies that confuses mathematicians but makes perfect sense to anyone who understands human behavior and biblical principles. Paying the smallest debt first may not always be the most mathematically efficient method, but it is the most psychologically powerful. It mirrors David's strategy against Goliath. Start with the small victories that build faith for the giant ahead. When a believer eliminates a $200 balance, it ignites momentum. And momentum, in both faith and money, is priceless. People often underestimate how deeply emotional money is. They think their problem is numbers, but their real struggle is discouragement. That's why the debt snowball works. It creates early wins that rewire the mind. Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but the snowball does the opposite." Every small payoff injects hope back into the heart. Even in business, CEOs celebrate small milestones to motivate their teams. The debt snowball applies the same principle to personal finance. A practical example: someone discovers they can put $500 each month toward debt. Their smallest debt requires a $90 minimum payment. With the snowball, they pay $590 monthly until it disappears. When it's gone, they add the $90 to the $500. And now $590 becomes $680 for the next debt. Later it becomes $1,100, then $1,600. Soon, a person who used to feel broke is throwing more money at debt than they ever thought possible. This is the compounding effect of discipline. From a biblical perspective, the snowball aligns with Zechariah 4:10. Do not despise these small beginnings. God often starts breakthrough in manageable increments, not massive leaps. The snowball teaches believers to honor progress and remain faithful in little, which Jesus said is the prerequisite for being trusted with much. Long before someone can make money consistently or build a profitable business, they must learn to conquer small financial battles with consistency. The snowball also trains a person to behave like an investor. Investors don't rely on emotion. They rely on systems. Whether someone invests in S&P 500 index funds or dividend-paying stocks, the smartest people automate their process and trust the structure. The debt snowball introduces the same kind of structure, creating automated momentum that becomes unstoppable after a few months. This builds financial discipline that carries into every future decision they make. And once the snowball is rolling, something even deeper begins to happen. The believer discovers that freedom isn't only about strategy, it's about sacrifice, mindset, urgency, and the habits God shapes during the journey. That's where the next topic takes us, into the emotional and spiritual refinement that happens behind the scenes. The discipline test. Sacrifice, side hustles, and the mindset God builds through short-term pain. Every financial breakthrough in Scripture comes with sacrifice. Before Israel entered the Promised Land, they endured wilderness discipline. Before Joseph ruled Egypt, he endured prison. Before David became king, he endured caves. In the same way, anyone trying to eliminate debt, especially on a low income, must walk through a season of intentional restriction. Not punishment, but pruning. God uses this period to build habits that will later protect their money, their business choices, and their ability to make money without losing themselves. During this season, luxuries need to pause. Vacations, new clothes, unnecessary subscriptions, impulsive food delivery, weekend entertainment, these become temporary sacrifices. This mirrors Hebrews 12:11. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness. A believer who willingly sacrifices for a year or two often enjoys decades of freedom. The short-term discomfort becomes long-term prosperity. And that's a trade anyone with wisdom will take. Finding ways to bring in extra income becomes a spiritual act as much as a practical one. Side gigs, driving, freelancing, selling unused items, consulting, tutoring, become tools God uses to accelerate deliverance. Even Paul made tents to supplement his ministry, Acts 18:3, showing that working multiple income streams is not a sign of failure but of wisdom. In the American market, most millionaires hold 2 or more income sources. Believers can adopt the same principles while keeping their values and integrity intact. This season also forces a believer to confront habits that once sabotaged their financial progress. Eating out randomly, buying emotional treats, saying yes to every invitation, chasing the lifestyle of others. These patterns lose their power when someone is on assignment. As the old habits break, new ones form. Reading books like The Richest Man in Babylon or Your Money or Your Life, tracking expenses daily, and practicing contentment become part of the transformation. God uses this discipline to shift someone from being controlled by money to controlling it. Another benefit of this season is that it separates the believer from comparison. While others post vacations, gadgets, and flashy lifestyles, The person on the path to freedom learns tunnel vision. They begin to understand Proverbs 14:23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. This mindset prepares them for leadership, for business growth, and for a future where they can make money without recreating the bondage they just escaped. Discipline creates identity, and as the person becomes stronger internally, they realize the greatest threat to financial freedom is not the debt itself. It's the distractions, comparisons, and emotional traps that keep them stuck. This leads directly into the next topic, where we address the invisible battles that must be won to protect the progress already made. The battle of focus. How distraction, comparison, and pride keep you in debt. Every financial transformation requires more than strategy. It requires focus. The enemy of progress is rarely lack of money. It's divided attention. A person may have a solid plan, a working budget, and the debt snowball rolling, yet still feel stuck because their eyes keep drifting to what everyone else is doing. In Scripture, Peter walked on water until he looked around. The moment he shifted his focus, he sank. Debt works the same way. When attention scatters, progress slows. When focus sharpens, freedom accelerates. One of the biggest traps is comparison. Social media shows the highlight reel of everyone else's life: vacations, new cars, upgrades, luxuries. Meanwhile, the person getting out of debt is eating at home, driving an older car, and cutting expenses. Without strong focus, jealousy, discouragement, or pride can creep in. Proverbs 14:30 warns, "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." In the financial world, envy also rots the budget. It causes people to spend money they don't have, breaking the discipline they've worked so hard to build. Another trap is distraction, small leaks that drain resources and momentum. A few random purchases here, a spontaneous outing there, one deserved treat after a stressful day, and suddenly the debt snowball slows down. Business owners in the American market know this well. Distraction kills profit. That's why they track KPIs, monitor expenses, and stay committed to long-term strategy. When a believer imitates that same level of intentionality, they begin using their money with purpose instead of reaction. Pride is another silent destroyer. Pride whispers, "You don't need a budget this month," or "You deserve to buy this," or "You're doing better than most people." Pride convinces someone to ease up right when they should tighten up. This is why Proverbs 16:18 teaches that pride comes before destruction. Financially, it shows up when someone abandons the habits that brought them victory. People who make money consistently and stay wealthy long-term are always those who remain teachable, humble, and disciplined. A powerful practice during this stage is guarding the mind as aggressively as one guards their bank account. Limiting social media exposure, monitoring emotional spending triggers, and replacing comparison with gratitude shifts everything. When a person focuses on their goals instead of others' lifestyles, they begin to see their progress clearly. Gratitude strengthens focus, and focus strengthens results. That mindset will later serve them well in business, investing, and every financial decision. And once a person learns to eliminate distractions and develop laser focus, they reach a new level of spiritual and financial maturity, one where God begins to shape deeper behaviors, not just better strategies. This leads naturally into the final step, where increase and responsibility start working together. From deliverance to discipline, behaviors God requires before He releases increase. When a believer finally breaks free from debt, the journey is not over. It is only transitioning. God does not release financial increase simply because someone wants it. He releases increase when someone has proven they can protect it. This is the pattern throughout Scripture. Before God trusted Joseph with national wealth, Joseph demonstrated discipline in Potiphar's house and in prison. Before God trusted David with a kingdom, David showed integrity in the pasture. Financial deliverance is the same. Freedom requires strategy, but increase requires character. Many people pray for more money while maintaining the same habits that once destroyed their finances. They want abundance without adjustment. But in the spiritual realm, increase is tied to identity. Jesus taught in Luke 16:10 that whoever is faithful with little will be faithful with much. That means the behaviors practiced during debt elimination, budgeting, sacrifice, negotiation, focus, are not temporary tools. They are permanent foundations. These disciplines become the scaffolding God uses to build long-term prosperity. For example, someone who mastered the debt snowball now understands momentum, consistency, and delayed gratification. Those same traits are essential for investing in index funds, building a business, or learning to make money through dividends, rental income, or online ventures. the habits built in the valley become the tools used on the mountain. This is why God rarely promotes people financially without first reshaping their behaviors. He is protecting them from recreating the bondage they just escaped. One of the greatest behaviors required for sustained increase is humility. A person must remain a student of money long after their debts are gone, continuing to read books like The Total Money Makeover, The Psychology of Money, or biblical texts like Proverbs keeps the mind sharp and the heart grounded. In the American financial market, the wealthiest people never stop learning, adjusting, and evaluating. A believer must do the same if their goal is not just to make money but to steward it. Another essential behavior is intentional generosity. When God frees someone from debt, he expects their hands to open toward giving, tithing, serving, and blessing others. This is not optional, it is biblical law. The same God who says the borrower is slave to the lender in Proverbs 22:7 is the God who also promises in Luke 6:38 that with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Financial deliverance becomes incomplete without generosity because generosity is what keeps the heart from slavery to money. And as the believer embraces these new behaviors, humility, discipline, generosity, consistency, something extraordinary begins to happen. Increase stops being accidental and becomes inevitable. God begins trusting them with opportunities, ideas, open doors, and resources they once felt unqualified to handle. And as this shift unfolds, the believer realizes a deeper truth. Everything they've learned so far was preparing them for something greater that comes next. Freedom from debt never begins with money. It begins with clarity, courage, and commitment. Everything you learned in this video is proof that God doesn't wait for perfect conditions to move. He moves when you decide to take ownership of the season you're in. Your strategy is clear, your steps are practical, and your foundation is now biblical. The only question left is, will you apply what you learned? Think about your future for a moment. How different would your life look if you followed these steps for the next 6 months? How much stress would disappear? How much confidence would grow? And how would your faith expand when you see God blessing the work of your hands instead of the chaos of your habits? Your next chapter depends on what you choose to do starting today. Write in the comments, "I take authority over my finances starting today." And watch how this powerful declaration begins to shift the course of your business and your finances from this day forward. If this message challenged you or opened your eyes, consider supporting our ministry through the link in the description. And make sure to subscribe and activate notifications so you never miss practical, biblical teachings that strengthen your relationship with money, business, and purpose.